This is episode 43 of the Shame Proof Your Life podcast, the one where I talk about turning pain into joy. I'm your host and life coach, Danita Bremer. Have you ever received a prompting that you ignored for a long time, like 17 years? This podcast is that for me. I'm inviting you to meander through my memories with me because I believe when we tell our stories and truly listen to one another, we can change the world. Okay, friends. Well, I think, an exciting announcement for at the end of the episode today. So stay tuned for that. But if you hear banging and clicking, it's because I live in an area where we get hailstorms, and we had a particularly bad hailstorm a month or so ago. And lots of my neighbors are getting new roofs. And so it's like this echoey, clicking, pounding sound. And I apologize, but there isn't much I can do about that. Today, I wanted to talk about this idea of turning pain into joy. It is something that has come out of my own coaching with my coach. As I have a business coach, and as I've been trying to really encapsulate in words what it is I do as a coach, recently it feels like some things have come together and I have a clearer vision. And it has to do with this idea of turning pain into joy. I'm going to get a little bit spiritual or religious on you. I'm going to quote some scripture and I'm going to quote some of our church leaders from the most recent general conference. So if that's not your thing, then maybe skip ahead to the next episode. But what I notice from several conversations with friends and family is that everyone is struggling with something. Now, intellectually, I have known this basically my whole life, but it seems like in the last few months or so that it has become more and more evident to me that each one of us, each individual is struggling in some way. Big struggles, small struggles. It doesn't really matter though. Like if I'm frustrated because my kids won't do their chores and you're frustrated because your husband wants a divorce or, something like that, I consider my kids not wanting to do their chores as like a small frustration, and maybe going through a divorce as a big frustration. It still, for me and for you, feels like frustration, right? Now, the intensity might be greater or less, but it's still the same feeling in our body, or at least I assume it is. I only inhabit one body, so I don't know what frustration feels like to you, but I know what it feels like to me. And I assume that frustration is frustration, right? I could totally be wrong about that. But basically, the point I'm trying to make here is that we all have struggles, and it doesn't matter if they're big or small, because your individual struggles, whatever's happening in your body for you, is valid. Just as a little bit of an example, I went to book club the other night and we were all chatting with each other, and it was kind of like a big venting fest, which is what women do when they get together and rub shoulders. And it's what we need for each other to feel seen and heard and, validated in our concerns. Some of my friends, I'm just going to list off without divulging who these things belong to, just as an example of a small smattering of what people are dealing with, right? Like no internet for 18 days, and then a broken computer and a difficult customer service experience. Young adults who are leaving the faith of their parents, leaving the church, young adults who are struggling with mental health and physical health problems. People who are trying to help their kids get through the college application process, and their kids' attitudes, bad attitudes, and, feeling estranged from family. That is just like a small smattering of struggles that people I personally know are going through right now. And that's just a few of them, right? So I've been thinking about this idea of turning our pain into joy. And of course, since I've been thinking about it, since it's been in the front of my mind, I have other things that come up that are like reinforcing this idea. And the first one is Helaman 5:12 in the scriptures in the Book of Mormon. And just in case it's been a while since you've read it, or maybe you've never read it before, I'm going to read it out loud here. And this is Helaman speaking to his sons. And now, my sons, remember that it is upon the rock of our Redeemer, who is Christ, the Son of God, that ye must build your foundation, that when the devil shall send forth his mighty winds, yea, his shafts in the whirlwind, yea, when all his hail and his mighty storm shall beat upon you, it shall have no power over you to drag you down to the gulf of misery and endless woe, because of the rock upon which ye are built, which is a sure foundation, a foundation whereon, if men build, they cannot fall. So I just want you to really imagine that. Imagine storms. And of course, there's so much symbolism in this verse, right? The winds and shafts in the whirlwind and hail and mighty storm, all of those different things that I just listed can be different struggles that we are each individually dealing with right now, our own personal storms. But imagine your own personal storm, whatever it is you are struggling with and trying to change and trying to accept right now. Imagine being tied to such a sure foundation that no matter what happens, you will not lose hope. You will not be dragged down to the gulf of misery and endless woe. I mean, that sounds pretty terrible, right? Misery and endless woe. No matter what happens, if your foundation is in the right place, that won't even be an option for you. Okay, so stick a pin right there in that verse of scripture, and then come with me over to a couple quotes from General Conference that I just happened to listen to both of these. They're from different sessions of conference. And in the last week to 10 days, I have listened to both of these talks, and I'm like connecting dots in my mind, right? So the first one is from the talk, Is There No Balm in Gilead by Elder Brent H. Nielsen. And he talks about how his father got a cancer diagnosis and his whole family came together to fast and pray for his father. And his father said, I have faith that I'm going to get through this. I'm going to recover. It's going to be fine. Right. And that's not what happened. His father ended up passing away because the surgeons got in to do surgery, and it was the cancer had gone too far, and they just said he doesn't have very long to live. And so he started thinking about, why is it that some people get their miracles? They get their healing miracle, and some people don't. Now, the reason why this story in particular resonates so deeply with me is because I have had the same experience where when my mom was in the hospital after she was in her car accident, we had missionaries come and bless her, and they blessed her that she would heal. And she didn't. She died. And that caused a huge faith crisis for my sister, who has left the church and has not come back. And that was 20 years ago. And it was very faith affirming to me. I recognized I had a choice in that moment, and I chose faith. I chose to trust God that my mom dying was supposed to happen. There's this little part in Elder Nielsen's talk that made me reflect on my own experience differently. And I'm going to read it to you. He says, as I now look back with more mature eyes and experience, I see that the Savior's healing power was evident in the lives of each of my family members. I was so focused on a physical healing that I failed to see the miracles that had occurred. And as I was listening to this talk and thinking about my own experience with seemingly miracles that didn't occur, I realized he was right. I never looked back on this experience with my mom passing away after a car accident and having gotten a priesthood blessing that said she would recover, that said she would heal, Honestly, I don't remember the exact words. And I've never looked back to see the miracles that did happen. We were so focused on, but they said she would heal. They said she would get better. And then she died, right? That we didn't look at the other miracles. We didn't look for the other miracles. And now, just like Elder Nielsen, I can look back with more mature eyes and understanding and see how the Lord's grace was totally 100% upon me. I don't know how I got through that time. It was really hard. And I was really young and I was naive and I was not experienced, but I got through it somehow. And now I can see how that was totally the Lord lending me strength beyond my own capacity. There's another talk that I wanted to read a quote out of, which is called Favored of the Lord in All My Days by Elder Villanueva. And he is talking in this talk, which is very appropriate, about how do we react to our afflictions. First of all, I just loved this one little tiny paragraph where he says, at the beginning of the Book of Mormon, Nephi states, having seen many afflictions in the course of my days, nevertheless, having been highly favored of the Lord in all my days. And I thought, oh, yeah, how many times have we read that first verse of the Book of Mormon? And I, Nephi, having been born of goodly parents, right? And I just have been thinking about, he's seen many afflictions and yet he was highly favored. And I thought maybe it's slightly different. Maybe it's slightly more appropriate to think, having seen many afflictions in the course of my days and therefore having been highly favored of the Lord. What if our afflictions, our trials, are the very things that make us highly favored of the Lord if we stop to look for the miracles, right? I mean, it's so easy to get bogged down in the trial, in the difficulty, in the discomfort. I get that. And that's very human and normal. And I'm not saying to not do that. What I'm saying is, when you have a little bit of perspective or just a moment to look for the miracles, look for how the Lord is strengthening you. Elder Villanueva says, my dear brothers and sisters, how do we react to our afflictions? Do we murmur before the Lord because of them? Or like Nephi and his former missionary friend, who he mentions in the talk, do we feel thankful in word, thought, and deed because we are more focused on our blessings than on our problems? Oh, I love that so much. It reminds me of an analogy that my children's school gave like a parent night thing. If you think about a potato starts out crispy, crunchy, kind of hard versus an egg. If you crack open an egg, it is soft, right? But if you put a potato in boiling water and you put an egg in boiling water, something different happens to each of them, right? The potato gets more soft and the egg gets more hard. This is the concept of when we are faced with a trial, with the boiling water, do we become softened and turn toward the Lord and look for those miracles and find the joy that's there even when we can't see it all the time? Or do we allow the trials to harden us and to make us turn away from the Lord? Right? I love that concept, that analogy, because in it is our agency. We have the choice to do either one of those things, to soften and turn toward the Lord or to harden and turn away from the Lord. Right? And as I think about that verse in Helaman about the foundation and the mighty winds and the hail and all of that, and I think of my life and I think of the storms that I've been through, I can't always in the moment understand how my foundation is helping me. Because when the wind is whipping and the hail is coming down and I'm cold and stung and like I can't even open my eyes because the wind is so strong, right? In the moment, I don't necessarily look at my foundation and my faith and how there are miracles happening. But once I get a little bit more perspective, maybe a little bit time, a little bit more removed from whatever the storm is, then I can pause and see the miracles and see the joy and see the gift that is in each of these trials. This verse, Helaman 5:12, was the theme for Young Women's Girls Camp several years ago when I was camp director. And at the time, we only had a very small number of girls. It was a stake camp. So a bunch of wards, girls came together in one big camp. And, we'd had this theme and we made a flag, which was like a silhouette of a girl climbing up a rock kind of thing. But you start going and doing things and you don't think about the theme, right? Well, this particular camp this year, we got there and it was beautiful. And it was supposed to be, 3.5 days or whatever. Well, on day 2, we started getting rained on. And the rain came and the rain came and the rain came and it hailed. And there was just so much moisture that came down and it started getting muddy and started like having puddles and cars getting stuck in the mud and girls getting their tents in giant puddles of water so that they couldn't sleep in their tents anymore, and we're like, what do we do? Right? Like weather, of course, is always a factor and you never know exactly how it's going to go. But those girls, they did not get discouraged. They did not get dragged down to the gulf of misery and endless woe. They were still singing camp songs and having fun and being agreeable and helping out. We did end up leaving camp a day early, which was kind of sad. We missed the bishop's fireside and all of that. But I was so struck by how positive those girls were. And then in the middle of it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is our theme. Our theme for camp this year is exactly about this, is about allowing the storms to come and not letting them drag you down and make you have a bad attitude and, make you turn away from the Lord. And I just was like, how perfect is that we had this theme and it basically came true. Like what a miracle that is. Of this is what we're trying to teach these girls. And we had real life experience in being able to do that. So when I was coaching with my coach late last week, I was talking about, I can't remember actually where this came from, but we're thinking about my business. We're thinking about how do I help people? What is it exactly that I do to help people as a life coach? And I have a very heart-led business. For a year and a half or so, tried to like set goals and reach goals, and I can do it, guys. Like I can be super successful. Whatever I set my mind to, I will be successful at. But what I realized was that even being successful in setting and reaching my goals, it didn't feel right to me. And so the last year or so, I have really been trying to be guided by the Spirit in my business. And it has felt very sort of abstract and I've been lost a little bit in the weeds of it. But I was in this coaching call. My coach was asking me these questions. And one thing that I have known for a while, and this kind of goes into the announcement, is that the name of this podcast is the Shame Proof Your Life podcast. But what I do is so much more than just dealing with shame. I love helping people through shame, helping people through this idea of I'm not good enough. I'll never be good enough, right? Because I just believe it's a flat out lie. And I believe when people can shift that belief about themselves, their life opens up so much bigger and more fun and more enjoyable. And so as I was talking to my coach about all these things, I realized that what it is, and in the process of this conversation, I connected several dots that felt like they were things that I felt really led to do, like this podcast. It was a prompting, and I know I needed to do this podcast. Nobody can convince me otherwise, but I did have a hard time until very recently with how does this relate to my business, or am I just supposed to have a podcast where I tell my life stories? What's sort of the bigger overarching theme here? And I've prayed about this. I have sought inspiration, and I really haven't, until very recently, gotten any clear answers. So as I was talking to my coach, and I just said, you know what it really is? It's about helping women connect with joy, especially those women who have in their past a lot of shame and a lot of pain. And I just was like, oh my gosh, that's it. Right? That I am on this podcast every week, which, by the way, I know this podcast is coming to you late. I apologize, but I really had to feel this episode out because changes are happening. And, I don't quite know how to quantify them or how to describe them yet, but I'm talking to my coach and I'm like, that's it. It's not about not feeling shame or knowing what to do when you feel shame. I mean, that's part of it for sure. But it's this broader perspective of taking the pain that you've been through. And some of us have been through some deep pain, and looking at it with a new perspective and seeing the miracles and seeing the joy and being able to be joyful, not just know that joy is possible someday in the future, but being able to connect with that joy now, even if we haven't totally worked through our pain and our shame and our fear and anxiety and all the things, right? But it's going from, and this is exactly what I think Jesus Christ does for us, is he helps us go from this fallen, broken world to an eternal, beautiful salvation. And it's that's what life is all about. Life is all about change, changing for the better, increasing our capacity. And one thing I realized in this coaching call with my coach was that I personally am not especially connected to joy. I understand it on an intellectual level, but she asked me, she said, you're talking about these feelings you want your clients to have. What if you had them more? What would change? What would be different? And I said, and this is just such a weird off the cuff answer, but I said, I think I would dance more. And it's like this lightness, this feeling comfortable in your skin and being able to move and express yourself more fully and freely, right? So she gave me this assignment to have a dance party in my kitchen every day and really try to embody that joy and that freedom. So because of that conversation, and I feel like it has been a long time coming, actually, the podcast is getting a new title. And the title came to me through a prompting as well. As you can tell, everything I do is very much driven by my faith. But the new podcast title will be Why Not Me? And I will explain that a little bit more in next week's episode. But yeah, we're not just talking about shame here, although that is for sure a part of it, our identity and how we view ourselves. But we're talking about moving from this prison of pain. I mean, that's just the most general, specific term I can use, right? Pain, whatever your flavor of pain is, and in being restricted by that, and having it determine who you can and can't be, and moving toward more joy and freedom and full expression of self, right? So I will explain where that title is coming from next week. But until then, I want you to really reflect back on your life and think about, especially those times that were really hard, those experiences that you've gone through that have been very difficult. Maybe you're still questioning why you needed to go through them, or, like, what were you supposed to learn? And instead of looking for how the Lord hasn't healed you or fixed it yet, look for like what the miracles already have been, where the Lord has strengthened you, where he has lent his grace to you and has increased your capacity. Just just go there. Just try it on and see what comes up for yourself. And just know that I'm totally rooting for you. And I want all of us, especially us LDS moms, we have the gospel, we have potential to really make a giant impact in the world and prepare the world for the second coming of Christ and all of those big grandiose visions. It starts with us. It starts with us healing and using our pain and our struggles for good. And really, I always think of the word sacrifice and sanctify, and sanctify is to make something holy. So when we sacrifice our time, when we sacrifice our money, when we sacrifice our ego, it means that we are making those things holy. We're making our time holy. We're making our money holy. We're making ourselves holy. Right. And that's the vision I have, this big, grand vision of creating a Zion people. And I truly believe that it starts with one person, which is you. And when you have that connection, that true, deep, abiding connection to joy, to your foundation in Christ, then you get to spread that connection to your children and grandchildren and to your neighbors and friends and anybody who you come in contact with. It's a ripple effect that sometimes we don't know what the ripple is, but there is a ripple. Okay, that's enough for now, and so are you. If you want to hear more of my thoughts that aren't necessarily my stories, sign up for my heart to heart notes or follow me on Instagram at Danita Bremer Coaching. Links are in the show notes. Until next time, go be you and follow the Spirit.